polygons. And it's really just one simple concept when you have congruence of figures. And that is that corresponding parts of congruent figures are also congruent. And so here's what that means. And this will be narrowed in with triangles a little bit later. But for any figures that are congruent to each other, all of their matching elements are congruent as well. So if you look at these two triangles here and the labels that you see on them, what you should see is the angle A of this top triangle has the one tick mark. It corresponds to which angle of the other triangle? The one tick mark belongs to which angle? D. Okay. If you look at angle B of the top triangle, what angle does that correspond to in the other triangle? E. And then finally, angle C is congruent to angle F, right? So you're finding how these pieces match up, and what you'll see is that the corresponding parts of these congruent figures are going to be congruent. So the same holds true for side lengths. So if I took the side length AB, so that has two tick marks, which side in the other triangle that it's congruent to does it match up with? Two tick marks is DE. I can take side BC. Side BC corresponds to what side of the other triangle? EF. And then finally, side CA corresponds to which side? Has the three tick marks, so that corresponds to FD. And it doesn't matter the order that you write the side or the points from the sides, but those are how the corresponding parts of two congruent figures are congruent themselves. So really all of the questions that you're going to see from 5.2 kind of are based on different ways of making these statements. So first one, I want you to identify based on the congruence pairs that you see right here. Can you write what would be the triangle, what would be the order that you write the letters here so that these corresponding pieces match up in the congruence statement itself? So I want you to see where would you put the P, Z, and X in order for these to be congruent triangles and based on the statements given. Angle measures being congruent is usually the easiest way to find the order, because if it says that X and T correspond, where is T going to go? Or sorry, where is X going to go in the congruent statement? First letter, second letter, or third letter? It corresponds to T, so it has to be the second letter. Okay, and Y corresponds with Z, so where does Z have to be written? The last letter. Okay, and even though you can use the sides, the two congruent sides to help find these as well, the angles give you the direct relationship. You don't have to like sketch it out and see where they fit. Okay, and that leaves one more variable. That last variable is the letter P. And so that's going to correspond to S and be written in the last spot. Okay, so it's just a matter of, again, finding where these corresponding parts match up. The congruent statement, when you write that two things are congruent to each other, like what we see right here or what we see right here, it means that those corresponding pieces match up and are congruent. Okay, so I want you to go up to this problem right here, do the same. Now we're going the other direction. If you know what the congruent statement is, can you find what corresponding pieces will be congruent to each other using the drop down, or in this case, it's the matching. Okay, just match A, B, C, D, E, or F for each of those elements from the left side of the congruent statement to what it matches to on the right. Congruent statement is going to be one of the easiest ways to kind of match these. Okay, so I'm going to go through and do the angles first. The angles are the easier ones to find. So if I look for my first angle is angle P. So P is this middle letter, so it's going to correspond to which angle in the other triangle? Q. Okay, so I'll answer C to that. Okay, go to my next angle, R. R is the first letter, so it's going to correspond to Z. And then finally, my last one, V. V is the last letter, so it's going to correspond to X, which is B. Okay, so that's the first, that's just looking at my angles. Okay, when I look at my side lengths, it's going to be the segments, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to look, ZP is my first two. So notice I'm like when I look at this, I draw a little bar over the top to indicate ZP. Those are going to correspond to the first two, which is RQ or QR. Again, it doesn't matter which order they go in. XR. XR is the first and the last, so it's going to correspond to ZV or VZ. Again, it doesn't matter which order. Here I have ZV, option A. And then finally, XQ are the last two, so it's going to correspond to PV or VP, so that's option F. Okay, and so that's what you're looking at for these. Again, use the congruent statement to help identify what your corresponding parts are, and those corresponding parts are going to be congruent. All right, I want you to try that exact same thing over here with these quadrilaterals. Okay, can you find what the statement would be? I'm going to zoom in on this just to make it easier to see. So if I look here, K has this 3 arcs to it. That corresponds to which vertex in the other triangle has 3 curves on the, or arcs for the angle? T. Okay. Look at G next. G has the 1, so that corresponds to Q. Okay, H. Now, as you start to look at this, what you can see is just from the naming convention of a polygon, it goes in consecutive order, right? So you don't need to, once you find the 2, it tells you the direction that these are going. And here you see from T to Q, it goes in this direction. So you can fill out the rest of them by just filling in R and then S, just going in that same direction, consecutive points. But you can also look to see too, right? H has 2 tick marks, or so does R, and J has the 4 tick marks, so does S. So you can still match them up that way as well, but once you find the pattern, you can just apply the rule for naming to continue it. Right, so not only are you going to be finding those, the pieces, the corresponding parts that match up and are congruent, the other thing that you need to be able to do is actually find the measures and apply those measures along with what we've already talked about in some of the, in the last section, the triangle sum, and you can find what the other measurements are. So I want you to see if you can answer this last question on this slide. Okay, can you find what the angle measures are? Okay, and the side lengths are given the congruent statement and the image that goes along with it. All right, so when you're looking at a problem like this, you can, if you want, just identify the individual elements that you need and then kind of work from there. But it might also just be easier to find and label everything and then go in and answer the questions that you have. Okay, so you know that this obtuse angle is 100. I'm going to go ahead, since these are congruent to each other, I'm going to label the obtuse angle 100. And now I have 100 plus 39. I know that this remaining angle Z is going to be 180 minus 100 minus 39, and that's going to leave me with 41 as my angle measure Z. Once I have Z, I can see Z corresponds to L, so I can label L 41. X corresponds to M, so I can label M 39. Here I have LN. LN is these last two. They correspond to YZ, so YZ will also be my 8. And MN, this side length is my first 2 letters. That corresponds to XY. That means this will be 13. So it might just be easier to label everything, all the possible things. There's not much that goes into that other than being organized. And then you just start answering your questions. So angle Y is 100. Angle M I see is 39. Angle Z, when I look, is 41. And side XY is 13. So I can then go in and answer my questions without having to go back and forth, and you just label everything that you can label to start with. Okay. All right, so like I said, these are the 4 questions that you're going to see on your homework. And there is one more concept just to look at, and it's also kind of like the sum of the acute angles in a right triangle add up to 90. It's in that sort of in that kind of vein of this is pretty intuitive. If you have 2 triangles and they share 2 common angles, right? Meaning here if angle B is congruent to angle E, and angle A is congruent to angle D. If that's what was given, then the third angle theorem says that if 2 triangles share 2 angles that are equal, then the third angles are also congruent as well. So this means that you can come to the conclusion that the third angles C and F would also have to be congruent.